Okay, now we're going to have our PowerPoint on isometric pictorial views. And this is going to be our 3D view that we are going to use the most often. And you can remember the term isometric because it's I saw. It's how you see things when you look at them. You can actually take a physical cube and turn it on the side and tip it so it looks just like this. The three adjacent faces, this is always the right-hand side, this is the front, right, and top. And we have all these little angles in here. This is 30 degrees. You really don't have to worry about that too much other than to know it's 30 if we were to give you that on the test question. But the paper we're going to give you, like the handout you have, already has the lines drawn at 30 degrees for you. This is the width, depth, and height. I'd like for you to draw this cube in your notebook and write these 3 dimensions down. This is a kind of question that you will see on a test in the future. This is the width of the front, the depth, and the height. And it's important to know those for test questions. This is also very important to write down in your notebook. When we're choosing which side needs to be our front view, you always need to think about these 5 things. We want it to be sitting in its most natural position. For instance, you wouldn't turn a stapler up on the end where it's kind of floating in the air. We also want the position where it shows the best shape and it shows most of the contours, most of the detail. The longest dimension should be in the front view, and we should have the fewest hidden lines. It should also be the most stable. It shouldn't be a view where things would tend to tip over. From here on out, when you start to draw your own drawings and you're deciding what needs to be the front view, you will be responsible for picking the best front view based on these characteristics. So pause the video and write these down. You must have these in your notebook. So let's look at the best front view of this object right here. Why is this the best front view? Well, this is our longest dimension right here. This is most stable. It's the most natural position for this to be in. It wouldn't make sense to sit it on this end because it would tend to tip over. Sitting like this, it doesn't have any hidden lines. If we swung it around the other way, it would have hidden. This would be hidden. And this gives us the best description of what the shape looks like. So this is the proper alignment. This is the front, this is the right, and this is the top. We're now going to go through and talk about the box method. Basically, this method is where you put a box around the very outside of a shape and cut off the parts on the inside. When we're doing sketching, we're not going to have this problem where ours end up looking like this because we're going to be using isometric paper that already has the proper lines on it. But this is an example of what a good sketch would look like. Yours should not ever look like this. We're going to be doing some examples here, and they follow along with your handout. But here are some examples that look like similar to what we're going to do. So now you need to follow along on your handout and draw this along with the video. This is the shape we're going to draw, and this is our isometric paper. Notice if we drew a flat line here, these would be going up at a 30-degree angle from horizontal. Your paper should always be oriented like this, where the lines are going up and down, because in our view here, the lines are going up and down. If you turn this 90 degrees, it's not going to work. It must be with these lines like this. So the first thing you need to do is draw a box on this side, and our end over here is 1.5 long, so this needs to be 1.5 going this way. And then our whole box is 3 tall, so we're going to draw 3 tall and draw what's basically a parallelogram right here. Now connecting to that, we're going to draw a parallelogram going back, and you need to count the number of squares here and make yours the same number. Now finish off drawing the prism here by drawing the top parallelogram. These are all our construction lines, so they should be drawn very lightly at this point, just like we've talked about. We're now going to draw in this line right here across the top, so count over the right number of boxes from there and draw this line in. And from the bottom up, it's this 1.5 squares up to right here. Count up and draw that one across there. Now we need to connect this dot to that dot on both of those to make this slanted portion. Now we're going to start drawing in our object lines darker. Remember, all this was drawn very lightly to begin with. Now we're going to draw in our darker object lines. Start with the top that looks like the top of this one. Now the front. Now the right side. And finally finish in with the sloped part. There were no other faces, so this is all we had to do on this one. Now we're going to add some tonal shading. Decide where your little light source is going to be. Ours is going to be over here, and we're going to do tonal shading where we do the three faces in three different shades. Since the light source is here, this is going to be our darkest side, and this is going to be our next lightest side here, leaving the top blank. Alright, now we're going to do the other example you have. It's going to look like this. This is what it looks like when it's put together, and they've just broken it apart so that we can get a better idea of what it actually is if we had the pieces separated. So this is showing us that it's 3 units long, 2 units tall, and 2 units deep. So we're going to start by doing the outside of this box. So it's going to be 2 by 3 by 2. So we start off on this end with a 2 by 2 box for the end. Now we're going to come across 3 because it's 3 deep and draw the 3 deep in there. I'm sorry, the 2 deep in there. We're doing this top part here. Come down 1 and draw that in. Now we've got the corners of the top part. Now we're going to come up and do this little part here. We have a big box for the whole outside. Now we're going to come in and do this little top part right here and put it in right there. Now they're going to come on this front face here and draw this front square in right there. Remember, this is all done very lightly, as these are just our construction lines, and we're later going to come in and darken up our objects. A lot of people have trouble seeing exactly how it's going to look, like seeing it in their mind before we actually start darkening it up. Now they put in a dot right here, and they're going to draw in this end right there, right there. Now it looks like a bunch of little sketches, and it's kind of hard to envision, so this is where we're going to start drawing our object lines. The top part here is 1 by 2, and we're going to darken it in right here. And this front part is 1 by 1, and we're going to darken it in right there. Now we're going to do this end over here as 1 by 1, and we're going to darken that in. Now they've drawn some lines going straight down from the corners here, and they've kind of drawn a lot of these lines in. I would now start myself, because this is basically just drawn right over the top of what we had. I would start with my object lines, and we're going to work on the inner faces. Think about what's happening. If I start at the top part here, it needs to come down 1 here, down 1 here, and down 1 here. Draw those 3 in. It's starting to make this top part right here. Now we see that this part right here makes this kind of zigzag look, so they've drawn that face in. It's over and over. That's this part here, over and over. Now all that's left is to draw the rest of this little cube that sticks out here and fill in. And don't forget to come back and put this little crease that we can see right there. Notice we do not put in all the little blocks where all these little blocks were connected. We're only drawing parts that are actually edges, actually corners on our box. Then we need to do our tonal shading. Find a light source. One side, like the front, make it darker. Another side, like all the right faces, all the ones facing to the right, should be a medium shade. And the top is all left white. These are just a couple of examples. You do not need to draw these, but notice how we would draw some real life objects in isometric. A clothespin, a chair, or even, this is from a sketchbook. This is from Mr. Tupper. We looked at something else of his earlier, and that's his Tupperware in isometric. Okay, that's it. Make sure you get your notes in your notebook.